For joining. I think we are still in this morning. Feels like a long morning so far, but it's going to whiz by. I think in the next hour with Jenny here. So I'd really like to welcome everybody on behalf of the Forestry Commission. My name's Jo Ridgway. I'm the Organisational Development Director, and I'm the Senior EDI Sponsor at the Forestry Commission. So thank you for joining the webinar today. It's really to celebrate National Inclusion Week. As you can see from if I sort of get out of the way, you can see the banner at the back. I'm sitting here with Wali Rahman, who is our Diversity and Wellbeing Manager, who has been absolutely well, I think Teresa called him a dynamo, and he absolutely is since he joined us. So we're very blessed to have you here with us. So National Inclusion Week was set up with the aim of creating dedicated annual events for inclusion in the workplace. I think really where inclusion could be highlighted, celebrated, and also discussed. And this year's theme is Take Action, Make Impact. And that's really about taking considerate action that make positive and lasting impact in your own organisations. And the topic of our talk today is equality versus equity, which will be delivered by Garrett, OBE, I'll introduce Jenny in just a moment. So thank you, Jenny, for joining us. Before we start, I'd just like to mention a few of the housekeeping rules. First of all, there are some closed captions or subtitles within the chat should you wish to need them or use them. You can find that in the options on your Teams app or the browser. So we are recording the session for anybody who couldn't attend, and that will be available on the FC website only. If you could feel free to keep your cameras on or turn them off. I know sometimes it can get a bit sort of wibbly at home with Wi-Fi, so do please feel free to do whatever suits you. We're also really pleased to see so many people have registered from lots of different organisations, which for me is fantastic because it's about collaboration, it's about getting stories out there and shared, and people getting to know each other across what is a very large organisation. So do say hi in the chat if you sort of recognise somebody you know from another department, or perhaps somebody you haven't been in contact with for a long time, or somebody you don't know that you actually would like to make contact with during or after the session. That's what these events are all about. So I'd like to just spend just a moment or so introducing Jenny. So Jenny's going to blush now. I want to cover her ears. So Jenny is an award-winning career coach, a leadership trainer, a speaker, an author. I have Jenny's book here in front of me, which is an excellent read. She's an advocate for inclusive leadership and provides training for organisations, as well as mentoring and support for individuals from underrepresented communities to earn leadership positions. She's also well known for her work empowering working women, particularly female breadwinners, through her book, Rocking Your Role, which I think is a really fantastic title. Fairness and empowerment are at the heart of Jenny's work, and she also believes that when women thrive, we all do. She's an associate member of the Professional Speakers Association, numerous speaking agencies such as Champion Speakers, and a popular speaker listed on the International Women's Day website. She's also delivered 2 incredible TED Talks, so if you haven't looked at those yet, then please do after the session, and is also a regular commentator on Sky News and LBC Radio. Jenny's reached over 30,000 individuals globally, making her a leading inspirational speaker in the field of diversity and inclusion, from Australia to Botswana, the US, Spain, and the UK. Jenny's left a mark by inspiring and motivating people to become more inclusive and diverse in their thinking and their actions. So in this talk, Jenny's going to give us an overview of what the differences are between equality and equity and how it can be achieved in the workplace. This will be based on her latest book, Equality versus Equity, which is about tackling issues of race in the workplace, but in the context of all protected characteristics in general. So without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Jenny, and I know you're going to speak with us for about 40 minutes, and Wally's going to be keeping a check with myself on the chat box, and then we'll be able to put some questions to you at the end. So thank you very much, and you're very, very welcome to join us today.
Thank you so much. As you said, yes, when someone reads out all that you've done, it does seem amazing. The little Jenny from the block, as I think of myself, doing all of those things. But thank you so much. Thank you for welcoming me. And thank you to everyone who's here from whichever part of the civil service you are from. I'm really delighted to be speaking with you today. As was said, I'm going to be talking about equality versus equity during this National Inclusion Week. And as I talk through my thoughts, ideas, things that I think that can help you, I really want you to hold in mind that this is about taking action and making an impact. What's the one tiny thing that you can do that can make a massive difference? It doesn't of course, you're going to have big ideas about changing the world like I do on a daily basis. But some of those small things, if the 150 of us or so who are here, if we all take one small action, what a ripple effect that will make, what an impact that will make in our organizations and in our societies. So I encourage you to be thinking about that tiny thing that you can do straight after this session or first thing tomorrow morning. That's not going to seem like it's life-changing, but possibly will be. So, the first thing is a reminder that diverse teams are more innovative, they're stronger at noticing shifts and adapting to those shifts, and also how important it is for us to match the people we serve. If we represent them truly, then they will trust in us. They will know that we have their best interests at heart, that we understand where they're coming from and can empathize with them. And so this is just so important. It's not all about bottom line, but it can make a difference to our bottom line. But we know how much the world has changed recently with COVID-19 and how much we've had to adapt, technological advances, with things happening all around the world that have a ripple effect on us. We have to be able to be our best, don't we? And so actually diversity, but also very importantly, equity and inclusion make that difference. And I bet every single one of you is competing for the very best talent and maybe struggling to hold on to that talent that you have. And so diversity is not enough. It's so important for us to create environments where everyone can thrive. In fact, earlier today, I was talking to some managers and they were talking about staff not being as confident as they would like them to be. And it just gave me the opportunity to say, what does confidence look like to you? Now, confidence in one person can look very different to confidence in another. Are we trying to have this cookie cutter model of what confident staff look like in order to promote them and in order for them to advance? And what does that do to individuals? It says, I need to be a certain way. I need to look a certain way, behave a certain way to show I'm confident in order for you to consider me for the next level up. And what we do then is we create people who feel they have to assimilate and act very similarly, and we actually crush out of them all the things that make them different, all the things that we can appreciate and make the most of, the uniqueness, the superpowers, the different perspective that is so important. For every single organization that is here today, what you need to do is harness difference, make the most of difference, celebrate difference, and utilize that difference for the good of your organizations and for the good of all. This is why diversity, equity, and inclusion is so important. And of course, no issue is more important than another. Whether you have a disability, you are neurodivergent, your sexual orientation, whether your ethnicity, whether you belong to any of those characteristics, or have an intersection of those identities. Actually, everyone's issue is important, and there is no single issue. So, one of the things I think to consider, first of all, is that we don't want to get into oppression Olympics. When we're taking action and making impact, where you start doesn't matter as long as you do start. But it can always be useful for you to think about where the areas that I don't feel confident talking about. Yeah, if you don't feel confident and don't feel educated in the area of sexual orientation or ethnicity or age, which is a big area that we do need to consider, then actually maybe you need to do some work around that. But none of these are more important than the other. They are all key. And I love this quote from Martin Luther King: "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." Where is the injustice in your organization? Where are the microaggressions taking place? Where is the bias happening? Because actually that impacts everyone. When we stay silent about things that matter and that we see, it tells everyone how we behave in our organization and what is important to us. And as soon as we start to understand that actually, if I see people rising through the ranks and certain groups not rising through those ranks, actually that matters. Even though I'm not in the group that's being discriminated against, it should matter to me, because it says something about the organization I'm a part of. It says something about the organization's ability to serve everyone here. And so it all matters. Even when we think it doesn't impact us, it absolutely does. And that's why we should really care about this. So I want to talk about equity because, that's the title of the talk: equality versus equity. And for some people, you might think equity has become a bit of a buzzword right now. What does it mean? Is it just a new word that we're using? I have a definition from my book that I use. So equity is about understanding and giving those from underrepresented groups what they need to achieve equal outcomes. Okay, so that's what we're thinking of. What do people need to achieve equal outcomes? And that's achieved by considering the systems that disadvantage and seeking to overcome them. And to do so, we need to take a very individual approach to lead, share power, and focus on outcomes. When we think about equality, what we've been thinking about is treating everyone the same. Okay, so giving everyone an equal opportunity rather than focusing on equal outcomes. And what that means often is if there's an imbalance in the beginning, we give everyone the same, and what we do is reinforce the status quo. We reinforce the imbalance. Now, this can be challenging, actually, this thought, because many of you might be managers yourself. And what you're thinking of is, I want to treat everyone fairly. And if I treat everyone the same, then I won't be accused of favoritism. But when we start to shift our focus to equity, we realize that fairness isn't sameness. Fairness is understanding that actually, because of whatever reason it is, because of my disability, asking me to come in every day and sit at my desk just because so I'd be present and visible, that isn't fairness, because what the effort it takes and the discomfort I experience in the workplace doesn't mean that I'll be my most productive. But what it does mean is that you might have to work as a manager to make sure my work is more visible to others, because those in the office have more airtime possibly. And so how can you make sure that what I do is visible so that I get equal outcomes, the opportunity to go for roles that are more senior, even though I might not be in the office all the time? So equity is not about treating people exactly the same. It's about understanding the barriers to my success and removing them. And it's about enabling me to have the same outcomes as other people. And sometimes that's around structures that exist in organizations that disadvantage particular people. I think so much now we're realizing when it comes to recruitment, should we ask for that qualification? Should we ask for those years of experience? Or should we be looking for people who have the capacity to learn and adapt? Should we be looking for people who have the transferable skills that we can then develop in our organization? So starting to look creatively and differently, rather than having this box that everyone needs to fit into that works for certain groups of people, but doesn't work for others, and therefore creates a barrier to success. So how do they differ? As I've said, equality is about treating everyone the same. Equity is about considering the systems that disadvantage and seeking to overcome them. Yeah? And we're really considering what that is. Do people have to have a certain accent to be successful in your organization? You know, so many times we know that accent discrimination exists, and that people with accents sometimes are therefore not even considered for more senior roles, not considered as articulate. So actually, what can we do about that? There are unwritten rules in every one of your organizations. What can we do to make those rules more visible and then dispute them? Yeah. There was some research that was done in 2019, which said that actually people with a Birmingham accent and a Caribbean accent were considered less intelligent. Yeah? Who's holding these biases and discriminating in a way that they wouldn't even know that they're doing it? Because what happens is we have our bias and then we look for evidence to back up our reason for not employing someone, for not putting them forward for that stretch opportunity. So equity is about understanding that. Actually, perhaps someone with a Birmingham or Caribbean accent might be being ignored in my organization, not being considered. So how do we move them forward? What do we have to put in place to make sure this discrimination does not happen? Are we looking for cultural fit rather than actual adding to the culture? So looking at people and meeting them and saying, oh, not sure if you'll fit in with the culture here, instead of considering what could they add to the culture here that it doesn't exist right now. So really turning things on their head and starting to take different perspectives. Equality is about taking a very collective approach, and equity is about taking a much more individual approach. As we know, just because I have a protected characteristic or an intersection of those characteristics doesn't mean that I'll be the same as the next person with exactly the same characteristics on paper. And therefore, you have to get to know people human to human to understand what they need from you to be successful. We can't make assumptions. We can't decide that everyone who is from the LGBTQ plus community needs a certain type of support. We can't decide that everyone who's over 60 needs a certain type of support. What we have to do is get to know people and really understand what they bring, what their strengths are, and also what they might need support with. Equality needs management, equity needs leadership. It needs you to really be able to articulate why you think equity is important and make bold and brave decisions that create equal outcomes for everyone. And that might mean that you say, actually, you know what? We have two candidates exactly the same coming for this role. I'm gonna make the choice to seek out difference and choose that candidate, actually, because I think they'll add a new perspective, a different way of thinking, some new ideas to our team. It takes bold moves. It takes leading from the front. It takes role modeling. It takes sometimes calling in behavior that you see and you think that's not quite right. I'm not going to turn a blind eye. I'm going to use this as a teachable moment. And let's all think about this. It takes owning up to times when you haven't been equitable yourself and knowing that you are fallible, that you make mistakes. as we all do on this journey around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it takes moving from holding power and knowing that you're senior to saying, how can I share power? That can be tiny things like asking different people to chair meetings, sharing your power. It can take distributing your leadership to give other people a voice and a chance. It can be as small as saying, oh, we interrupted that person and they were still mid-flow in their point. I really want to hear what they had to say. Can we pause and make sure we do that? Yeah, this is what sharing power looks like. And it's moving from being input driven, I want to give equally to everyone, to being output driven. What is going to create those equal outcomes for all of us? So this diagram, I think, sums it up. We live in an imbalanced and unequal society. If we think about it like the seesaw, some of us have more weight and power than others. That is the reality. But look at all the stats that the ONS put out. Look at all the government stats. Look at the stats in your organisation about who's at the top. Think about whether you match the population of the people you serve. Who is disadvantaged and who is doing better. Yeah, these, the stats tell us all of it. Even if you don't have the stats internally, you have the stats of society, and all of your organizations are a microcosm of society. But what's wonderful about organizations is actually you can change things. You have a huge amount of power. So the top left is where we are in society. What we're trying to do through equity on the top right is add some sandbags in order to balance things up a little bit. And those sandbags can look like, as I said, some of the things I've already said, but they can also look like sponsorship. Who might need a senior leader to advocate for them? They could look like actually you considering what you do socially as a team. And if it's always revolving around the pub, for example, thinking about having some alcohol-free events that don't exclude people. Yeah. So it could be something like that. It could be what we talk about in the way that we talk about it. Do we automatically assume that someone's partner would be, a different sex to them, and therefore the person who has the same sex partner can't talk about their weekend because they'd be revealing too much of themselves and put themselves perhaps in the firing line? Is it about assumptions that we make? Do you really need a pay rise? Doesn't your partner earn the most of the income? These things still happen. These things are still said in 2023. Is it about uniform staff? Been working with quite a few organisations that have staff who wear uniform. And sometimes people in uniform aren't treated as well. I mean, it obviously depends on what your uniform is, but sometimes someone in uniform can be treated not as well as those who don't have to wear uniforms in the same organisation. Or sometimes uniforms are not tailored to individuals. If there are flat caps, if I have dreadlocks, can I wear that? If I am veiled, can I wear that uniform? I, many years ago, worked for IKEA, and the trousers were all tailored for the male body. They were so uncomfortable. Yeah. So all of these things we can do to change uniforms, to actually pronounce people's names correctly, use the pronouns that people want to be used. These are all the different sandbags we can add. And it can also be things like actually who gets the stretch opportunities, who's considered as having potential here, who do we say could never be a leader and why, and how can we start to put things in place to change that? As you do that in your organizations, it's important to recognize that those who have been the powerful ones in the future can feel really uncomfortable with this. They can feel out of control, fearful that they perhaps are no longer, favored in some way, that they are going to be ignored and disadvantaged. And so it's really important to acknowledge that the majority group might feel fear as you create more equitable solutions in your organization. And also those you give the sandbags to, if they've never had them before, might feel very uncomfortable and wary of receiving them. So they might not immediately welcome them with open arms, saying, yes, this is brilliant, you're giving me opportunities, you're giving me a chance. They might not be that trusting, and creating the environment which says, actually, this is why we're doing this, this is what we're trying to achieve. We value those from the majority group, and we want to support those from underrepresented groups to be able to have the same outcomes. It needs to be a very clear message that's articulated, so you don't get so much resistance, and so that people from underrepresented groups understand why you're doing what you're doing, what your aims are, and what the opportunity is for them. So these are really key elements when you're adding power or creating equitable solutions. Where we want to get to is this point at the bottom, where people are given what they need to be successful, and there's a to and fro of sharing of power. Now, this is what we need to do in organizations, but we also need to remember that the people who are in your organizations have had a life before that. And if we keep with this idea of the play park, they might not have been able to get into the play park because of their wheelchair. Yeah, they might not have understood the rules of playing the games because of their neurodivergence. Just by virtue of who they are, other parents in the play park might have said, don't play with that child, I think they're going to be a bad influence. And so we all bring that to the workplace, as well as what is trying to be achieved. So if you're not automatically trusted and supported, if you feel that someone isn't showing up as themselves fully in the workplace, it's important to recognize what might have come before, but also what is happening culturally within your organization, which gets in the way. It's not as simple as just saying, I'm giving you this opportunity, go for it. There are so many other things that we might have to overcome in order to move forward. And your attitude really matters. If someone does go out of their way to take the courage to give you feedback about yourself or your team, how you receive that really matters. If you burst into tears and make it all about you, the person's not going to come back to you again in the future. However mortified you feel, it's important for you to manage your own emotions around this. If you dismiss it and say, oh, you sure this is happening? Perhaps it's a personality clash. I've had always good experiences with that person. Again, you're not acknowledging the person and really taking into account what they're saying. And so they won't come back to you again. If you say you'll do something and then never take any action, again, the person will lose trust in you. So it's not just about taking action to make an impact. It's also knowing, actually, can I manage myself in these situations to build psychological safety and trust in my team so that they know that they can come to me, that I have belief in them, that I will take them seriously and acknowledge what is happening. This is what creating equitable solutions is all about. This idea of recognizing and accepting and celebrating our differences in the color of our skin, our differences in being able-bodied, our differences in sexual orientations, our difference in personality preference. Yeah? Too often I hear that extroverted people are the ones who get on here. Those who are more reflective find it much more difficult. How can we appreciate that? What about all of the other areas that we have and the characteristics that we have? How can we bring those together and celebrate them? That is a key element. And what it means is for us to, in a way, jump out of the goldfish bowl of our existence and recognize that there are whole new perspectives and differences and different ways of being. The goldfish doesn't realize that it's living and surrounded by water until it's taken out and it realizes how much it needs that to survive. And so many of us, particularly when we're in the majority group, don't realize that there's a whole other world that people are experiencing that can be very different to our own. That's not to say that if you're in the majority group, you don't feel pain, that you have had a privileged life. When we talk about power and privilege, what we're saying is that you might not have been discriminated against because of certain characteristics. As a Black woman, I can be discriminated against because of my ethnicity and my gender. Absolutely. But I'm a heterosexual Black woman, so I'm not going to be discriminated against because of my sexual orientation. And that means in areas where people might experience homophobia and discrimination because of their sexual orientation, I have privilege in those spaces. I can step in, I can speak up, I can advocate for them, because it's exhausting when you're from an underrepresented group to always be advocating for yourself. And so it's important to understand where you have privilege and use that power with humility. Don't see it as something to bear, as a problem, but understand that privilege and say, you know what, I don't experience discrimination because of these areas. And that means that in those spaces, I can really show up for other people and help to create more equitable solutions. And there are so many ways in which we can have power. Yeah? If you find yourself towards the center in this diagram, you will have power in particular situations. If you find yourself on the outer circles of this diagram, then you will have less power. And someone who is closer to the center can advocate for you and be a true ally. And it's important to know about the intersection of these identities and the difference they make. I spoke about being a Black woman. You'd think, well, that's two characteristics, two protected characteristics. Well, yes, in some ways it is. But what Kimberly Crenshaw says, who created this idea of intersectionality, she said, actually, this idea of intersection is that 1 + 1 creates a compound effect. And it's always so much more. So noticing those intersections with your colleagues and thinking about how you can support them. So I have some questions for you, and I just love it if you write in the chat what you think the answer is. So the first is, people from ethnically diverse communities are overrepresented in the ranks of the unemployed. ONS colleagues might know the answer to this, but data from the ONS showed that 4% of white people were unemployed in 2021, compared to what percentage from ethnically diverse groups? So just type in the chat what you think the answer might be. 40%? 10%? 25%? 60%? Okay, so we have quite a variety ranging from 10% upwards by the look of it. It's actually 8%, so not as high as many of you are thinking, but still double. Yeah, still double. So when we're thinking about equitable solutions, and we know that more people from ethnically diverse groups are unemployed, how does that impact how we consider what we're doing? How does that impact how someone might behave in an organization, maybe be scared of being unemployed from an ethnically diverse group, but also when we're recruiting, should we be thinking about that as well? Another question for you. There are significant gaps in the percentage of disabled people in employment. In July to September 2022, data published again from the ONS highlighted that there were 4.9 million disabled people in employment in the UK. 82% of non-disabled people were in employment, compared to what percentage of disabled people? So what percentage of disabled people were, were in employment, do you think? So we've got some stats, we've got 23, 15, 2%. Again, quite a variety. So 53%, an employment gap of 29%. Now, this is an opportunity for all of you, an opportunity for your organisations. There are so many people with a disability who could be employed in the UK and are not getting that opportunity. Okay, another one for you. Data from the World Economic Forum found that while white women in the US earn 81 cents for every dollar a white man earns, the same figure for American Indian, Alaska Native, Black, African American, and Hispanic women is. So how many cents for every dollar do you think they earn? So we need cents this time, as opposed to percentages. I think my computer's probably taking a minute to catch up, so I'm not seeing cents coming up from you all. I'm seeing percentages. But I'm hoping that you've given some answers in the chat. So 75 cents. So, you know, that might not sound like a huge amount, 81.75, but if you think about how many pounds you earn, and if you lost 6p for every single pound that you earned, that tots up by the end of the year, especially in a cost of living crisis. Another stat for you. Research from Stonewall's 2018 LGBTQ plus in Britain report highlights that 3% of white LGBTQ plus employees have been physically attacked by customers or colleagues in their workplace, compared to what percentage of those who are ethnically diverse and from the LGBTQ plus community. Oh, I'm seeing all your cents coming up now. Oh, yes, many of you were very close, so that's great. But again, we're looking here at a percentage. I mean, it's absolutely horrific that 3% of colleagues who are white and from the LGBTQ plus community have been physically attacked. It should not be happening, should it? So the stats are terrible in the first place. But when we add on the intersection, that means that we're also considering those who have the intersection of ethnic diversity as well. You know, what is it? So we've got 6%. I think my computer's catching up. 6%, 5% coming up from you, 12%. It's actually 10%. So over double. So if you're from an ethnically diverse background and also from the LGBTQ plus community, and you have a customer facing role, you know, the chances of you being physically attacked rise. You know, that absolutely shouldn't be the case. So when we're thinking about equity, what do? We want to preserve everyone's safety, but we also know that some people might need their safety preserved even more than others. And I think this is the last stat. According to the World Economic Forum, the percentage of Black women that have never had an informal conversation or interaction with a senior leader at their place of work is, what do you think? What do you think? The percentage of Black women that have never had an informal interaction with a senior leader in their place of work? Got 20%. Any more? 89%, 25%, 59%. And this is a huge stat. I know some of you did say higher, but also a huge problem. Because if you think, of course, application forms and processes are really important in the workplace. But if what we know is that having a senior sponsor who is willing to advocate for you makes such a difference. What it's saying is that 59% of Black women never get that opportunity to get a sponsor, because those sponsors come from those informal conversations, someone getting to know you and then advocating for you. So when we're thinking about equity, some of these stats can really help us, because they can show us where the imbalance occurs in our organizations and help us think about what to do. We might say, actually, let's formalize sponsorship so we know who's being sponsored and who isn't. And let's make sure that people who are high potential, no matter what their ethnicity is or their gender, receive a sponsor. that might be something you do to balance things up, for example. So I want to share with you some just disruptors that you can think about in your organizations. The first is make your decisions evidence, not bias based. Yeah. If you give a rating to someone, whatever that is, what is the evidence that shows that this is the case? Not just a gut feeling, not just, oh, actually, I really get on with them and I want them to do well and I want to work with them, actually. So I think they should go up the ranks. But actually, what is the evidence compared to other evidence, other colleagues' evidence that I want to give someone this rating? If you're going to give someone the benefit of the doubt, no problem, but make sure then you give everyone the benefit of the doubt. In terms of the research, it says those from underrepresented groups, that they're sort of given that mistakes by them are not tolerated. It's like give the majority group a chance, but actually they've made one mistake. It seems much bigger, and therefore they're not able to do so. So if you're going to give people a chance, give everyone a chance. If you waive objective rules, do it consistently. Yeah. If you're saying, okay, I'm not going to, that person can work from home, but this person can't. What are the reasons for that? Yes, they might have, they might have childcare challenges. Fine. But then the next person who has childcare challenges should also be able to work from home. Yeah. So it's about being objective in the way you do things. Don't insist on likability, modesty, or deference for some, not others. What I hear from people from underrepresented groups a lot is, yeah, I'm really grateful. And of course, we can all be grateful for our positions, for our jobs. But are we insisting on gratitude for people who are doing an amazing job and actually they're just doing great work? Why should they have to be modest or deferent to seniority or be someone who's seriously liked and one of the girls or one of the boys or whatever? Actually, it should be about their ability to do their job, their capability, their productivity, and the quality of what they deliver. So let's not insist on, oh, I have to like you, you have to socialize with me, all of that sort of thing. You have to be modest and deferent. If you're too confident, I'm not going to be happy about that. Yeah. So challenging how we're thinking and feeling. Don't make assumptions. Parents and carers are a big area. Don't make assumptions about what mothers or fathers want or are able to do. Many men tell me they don't take parental leave because although it's there, no one else is taking it. No one's role modeling it. That they think that they'll be criticised for taking it. Fathers are often told when they say, I want to do the school pickup or I want to take parental leave. Oh, well, can't your wife do that? So some of these things are still in place, these assumptions. And as I mentioned earlier, if you comment on cultural fit, executive presence, or other vague concepts, you need to start with a very clear definition and keep track to ensure they're applied consistently, because they're often a way to hide bias, to say those sorts of things. And give honest feedback to everyone who's evaluated. Otherwise, some groups won't get notice of problems in time to correct them. Again, the research tells us that people from underrepresented groups don't receive feedback in a timely manner. They might receive it at the end of year appraisal, at which time they cannot really do anything about it. So those are a few top tips for you. I hope you found them useful. I'm really happy to answer any questions that you might have. But I want to leave you with that question. How will you take action and make an impact? And I hope I've given you a few top tips to enable you to do so.
Thank you very much, Jenny. That was really inspiring and really useful. And judging by the comments in the chat as well, everyone has found that really interesting and useful as well.
Thank you, and thank you all for your claps. I can see them coming at the bottom of my screen.
So we've got a couple of questions in the chat. So I'll begin with this one from Angela Amadi, pardon me. How does the extra sandbags analogy fit with the standing on boxes equality meme? which seems to advocate removing the fence or barrier rather than a group-specific focus?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that ideally we would like to move the fence. The reality of all the organizations I work with is that we're not in a position to move it. We have to surface what the challenges are. We have to work towards them. We have to get more underrepresented groups into senior roles to then work on moving the fence. So I believe that this is the step towards that, but we're not there yet. And I think the idea of going straight there, the problem is we don't even know, we can't even see the fence. We don't know what it is. And so we have to work through it. So for me, this is the step towards moving the fence in the end. I hope that answers the question.
Brilliant, thank you. The next question is from Teresa, who says, how can we structurally begin to inculcate some of these guidances into our workplaces if very senior managers are not engaged with the discussion directly?
Yeah, that is a challenge, because I think absolutely you can have pockets of great practice in your organization, but you really do need senior leaders to be engaged in this. It does need to be led from the top. It needs the commitment, it needs the resources, and it needs to be on every single agenda. And the problem, if there isn't commitment from the top, then many people will think, well, this isn't something I need to do because it's not that high on the agenda. So you really do need to engage senior leaders in this, and I think perhaps part of it is helping them to understand what they can lose from not doing so. Every organization is afraid of being cancelled, afraid of being called out for doing the wrong thing. You leave yourself in danger of that if you don't have diverse voices and experience and behavior at the top of your organization. So you're opening yourself up for criticism and scrutiny, but also the pace of change is so fast right now that without that diversity, you're not going to be able to keep up, and you're going to lag behind. And the McKinsey research says that without diversity at the top of organizations just lag behind. They don't just perform in an average way. So this is so key for every organization. And I would point them to the research. I would point them to webinars like this one, try and engage people to come in and speak with them, to really engage them in this agenda, because there's a real problem if there isn't commitment shown from the top. I'm not saying that you can't carry on through your employee resource groups, for example, advocating, showing them the way, and also the more you engage with external organizations, it sometimes shows the senior team up a bit. So if your ERG is doing great work and your ERG is being recognized externally, or if you're doing great projects that are being recognized externally, that can then show your senior leaders that this is something that they should be considering, because people might be commenting externally and say, oh, you're doing these great things. And if they don't know about them and are not showing their commitment to it, then actually that will show them up. So that can be another way of engaging them. If that answers that question.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jenny. The next question is from Nadeem. I'll just sum up the question, because it's a long comment. So he talks about religious discrimination being one of the most prevalent forms of discrimination, but it seems that this protected characteristic is neglected somewhat currently. So Nadeem goes on to say, I may have missed it, but I don't think you mentioned religion once in your talk, and it wasn't listed in the Wheel of Power either. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's such a great point. Yes, and religion is not all I've missed out. Unfortunately, it's hard to cover everything. I think you make a really good point. I definitely know people who don't wear their hijab in the workplace because of how people have reacted to them, who don't pray during the day, even though they would like to, because of fear of repercussions and how people will behave. I think that absolutely religion is in there, and absolutely does exist. but I also know of some great practice. I've seen people wearing their turbans with pride and wearing different coloured turbans and really celebrating who they are. And many organisations with their employee resource groups adding, talking about race and religion networks, and starting to encompass that. I think more conversations need to be had. I think in this country, like talking about politics, people have veered away from talking about religion, and we need to break those barriers down. We can talk about religion in really positive ways, and some organisations I work with are doing so. So absolutely, there's a lot of education needed. There's a lot of support needed. I work with a supermarket. I've been working with them for about 4 years now. So, for example, some of the managers who are not, who are not Muslim, they in a Ramadan, they fast. They fast for a day and break fast with colleagues. So they can have a better understanding, and also an understanding that it's not just about fasting. You know, what is it really all about? So there are organisations that are taking steps forward to be better, but I would say absolutely, I didn't talk about religion. There are other characteristics that I haven't talked about as well, but they should firmly be on the agenda, and these conversations need to be had in organisations. Thank you for bringing it up.
Thank you, Jenny. The next question is from Naomi, who says, can you talk a bit more about what effective sponsorship looks like in practice in terms of championing people, succession planning, and so on for underrepresented groups?
Yeah, great question. Sponsorship, I think, is a highly successful way of making change and moving the dial in organizations, as is reverse mentoring. Reverse mentoring, it can be really successful as well. But if we just stick with sponsorship for a moment, when I'm talking about sponsorship, I'm talking about someone more senior than the person's line manager advocating for them. So not the person who manages them day to day. And what that person is doing is they're wearing their t-shirt, you know. So if you were my sponsor, you'd have a t-shirt with Jenny on it, you know, metaphorically. And what you'd be doing is rooms that I'm not able to be in, you would be saying, oh, you know, do you know Jenny leads that project? Oh, do you know Jenny has some of those skills? Maybe you should consider her for that project. Or what you'd be doing is enabling me to come into some of your meetings so I get a better understanding of what's happening strategically in the organization, helping me to have more exposure, introducing me to other people in the organization so I can network better, and really helping me to advocate for my career. The other thing that you might do is you might give me some tough feedback. You might say, you want to be here, Jenny, and you're currently here. This is the gap. And this is what you really need to work on. And maybe no one's ever told you that, but actually, this is what you need to know. And so that's what I see sponsorship as. And what's happened is in many organizations over time, people have been sponsored in an informal way. Now, that most of the time in UK organizations, there's this triangle. At the less senior levels, there's loads of diversity. And as you get to the top, there's less. And so the people at the top, on the face of it, will seem like a particular group, and they will have an affinity with people like them, people who have the same religious background, have educated in the same place, people who enjoy the same hobbies. They're attracted to those people and end up sponsoring those people. And then we have this cycle of the same sorts of people getting to the top. Sponsorship, if you formalize it and you make sure that people who haven't typically got sponsorship get it, that can really move the dial and change things.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jenny. The next question is from Mark, who says, do you have any thoughts on targeted universalism and how or if it is different from equality and equity?
When I guess I'm not sure what you mean by targeted universalism, but so when I think about it more as language. So instead of saying ladies and gentlemen, I will say everyone, and therefore I'm not excluding anyone. And so when I think about universalism, I'm thinking about making sure I don't miss anyone out. I think about it more as language. And the way I communicate and the way I include people. But that doesn't take away from the fact that I still need to have equitable solutions to create different outcomes, because me calling everyone saying everyone. It doesn't exclude anyone, but it doesn't particularly help someone achieve the same outcomes as other people either. So you might not have meant that, but that's how I interpreted the question.
Brilliant, thank you. The next question is from Catherine, who says, do you have any advice how to get underrepresented people into the senior roles when the barriers are against them?
Yeah, I think the organisation has to make a commitment to do so. Absolute commitment to do so. We, at my organisation, we run programs to help organisations do that. It's never about fixing the individuals who are not in those senior roles. It's about supporting them to learn how to navigate the organisation. It's about helping their managers to recognise that they are talent and that talent can be different, and that's okay, and that can even enhance or make things better. And it's about enabling them to have senior sponsors who will advocate for them. So I see it as this strong triangle. The person who has been held back for whatever reason, the underrepresented group, the manager, and the sponsor. And together, that's how you move the dial in terms of representation at top of organizations. Now, when people get to the top of organizations, we also need to make sure there's an inclusive environment for them, so it doesn't feel like they're running the gauntlet, that people are treating them in a tokenistic way. Oh, you're just here to tick a box, but that people are really valuing them, welcoming their diverse perspective, and enabling them to contribute at their best also.
Thank you. We've just got a couple more minutes left, so I'm not sure if we'll be able to get through all of the questions, but the next one is from Teresa, who asks for the reference to McKinsey research.
Okay, I can possibly is the best way to send it to you afterwards. I think it's just called Diversity Matters. They've produced the research more than once, so there are a couple of iterations of it. But I think it's called Diversity Matters. If you look up the 2021 document, there might be one after that. So that's the best place.
Brilliant. The next question is from Vicky, who asks, what can we do to ensure the expansion of AI does not increase disadvantage?
Yeah, what a great question. What a great question. I think that one of the first things is to make sure that there isn't a divide when it comes to access to technology and Wi-Fi and that sort of thing. So something societal that we have to make sure that everyone can have access to what they need. I think the other thing is to make sure that people who are at the forefront of developing it are ethical but also diverse. So we need both of those. We need strong ethics, but we also need a huge diversity there. What we know is that AI didn't initially recognize black women, I think, didn't recognize black women in the beginning. But, there are so many different ways in which AI has built in discrimination. It just emulates society, and also the fact that it's learning from what we put out there. So, the more awful things we put on social media, the more it learns about the worst of us. So how can we put the positive things out there? Because it's learning from everything we put out into the world. So are you putting out positivity? Are you putting out ways to do things? Or are we only putting out the worst and looking at that? And are we putting out solutions and hopes and dreams of what we want to achieve? So it's learning from us. So we need to put the best of us out there. That's my first thing, really. But otherwise, it's about making sure we're at the forefront of it, that we're not burying our head in the sand, those from underrepresented groups, that we are engaging with it so we can influence it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jenny. That's all we have time for, unfortunately. I know there are a few other questions in the chat. I'm really sorry we couldn't answer them all, but maybe we'll find a way to get those answered afterwards. So yeah, unfortunately we have to end the session there. Thank you so much, Jenny, for your time and sharing all your wisdom and learning with us, and thanks to everyone who attended the session. Please just be aware, I'm just going to put a link in the chat. So our next event is on the 5th of October with APHA and DEFRA to celebrate Black History Month. So the link is in the chat for you to register if you haven't done so already. Other than that, I just want to really thank Jenny once again, and thank you all, and hopefully see you again in the near future, and enjoy the rest of your day and afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Lovely to meet you all. And please do stay in touch. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you
very
so
much.
much,
Bye.
Jenny.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.